Welcome to Bloggers Creating Courses, the podcast which will take you behind the scenes of creating an online course. I'm your host, Verity Songon, founder and education consultant at veritysongon.com. I'm so excited to help you create an online course that you are proud of and to be part of your journey to scale your business as an online course creator. Let's get into the episode. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Bloggers Creating Courses. I'm going to start off this episode with just a little disclaimer. I do have my 6-month-old in the room as I'm recording this, so if you do hear a little baby giggle or a little noise that you think is coming from a baby, it is not your imagination. It just means that in post-production I was probably saying something that I couldn't edit out her talking at the same time. So if you do hear a baby, as I said, it is not your imagination. It's just that I've got my little one in the room as I'm recording this episode. But I kind of wanted to let you know that, and I wanted to go ahead and record the episode anyway because I wanted to keep it real. We're talking about imposter syndrome in this episode, and one of the things that I didn't want to do was wait until I could have childcare and move her around and what have you, because at the end of the day, there's a lot of you out there, myself included, who is a mother whilst running their business, and that can be tricky, but it doesn't mean that the kids need to change our priorities when it comes to our business. Yes, don't get me wrong, our priorities do change when we're running a business, and our goals and our priorities are all about them. However, I don't see anything wrong with taking them along for the ride. My children mean the absolute world to me. Anyone who knows that they mean the absolute world to me. But I don't see what's wrong with bringing them along for the ride of my business journey. I'm building my business for them, essentially, because I want to be at home more. I want to be spending more time with them. So yeah, it's kind of why she's along for the ride, and I'm completely unapologetic about it. So as I said, if you hear a baby in the background, just ride along with it and take it as part of the episode. But with that out of the way, as I said, for this episode, I really wanted to talk about imposter syndrome because I think it's something that comes up a lot when people are creating their own online courses. People have these thoughts of, I'm not good enough, or I don't know enough, I don't have the expertise, I'm not a qualified teacher, I'm not qualified in that area of what I'm talking about, I don't have any qualifications, I'm a hobbyist, or it's just something that's interesting to me. And imposter syndrome is something that everybody feels. It's something that if you talk to even the most successful people in your niche or the most successful people in business, if you listen to them on podcasts, on TV interviews, whatever, nearly everybody who I admire in the business world, in the celebrity world, or whichever world you want to look in, nearly all of them say that they have tackled imposter syndrome at some point in their careers, or they are still tackling imposter syndrome. And what I wanted to go through today in this episode is really hitting head on what is imposter syndrome and what can you do about it, particularly when it comes to creating an online course and teaching online. And I'm going to go out on a bit of a limb here and say that I don't necessarily think that imposter syndrome is a bad thing. We get imposter syndrome because we are pushed out of our comfort zone. And if we're pushed out of our comfort zone, then we're growing. And we're growing as people, as individuals, as creators, and as business owners. And without this growth, we might never explore new possibilities. And it might be easy to think that you won't create an online course because you aren't an expert. But what if you did create that online course? What's the worst thing that's going to happen? That you put a course out there and you get a ton of good reviews, that you get a load of purchases? Honestly, what is the worst thing that is going to happen? Ignore that imposter syndrome, you create your course and you put it out there. Just think about that for a minute. What is the absolute worst thing that's going to happen? So what I'm going to do now is actually give you an example of imposter syndrome and overcoming imposter syndrome from a previous job that I was in. So one thing that people may not know about me is that I'm a registered nurse in the UK. I still maintain my registered nurse training and license, and I have previously worked as a hospital nurse, emergency assessment, and after I left ward work, I went down to education and training, which I guess started my kind of formal education and training career. But that aside, one of my pet passions at the time, and still is talking about sepsis. And I'm not going to go into the medical terminology of what sepsis is and what have you. You can look that up. There's some fantastic websites out there, the UK Sepsis Trust and Sepsis Alliance. But essentially, sepsis is that overwhelming response to infection, which is or can be life-threatening. Now, I did a couple of projects on sepsis management and treatment in the hospital that I was working in at the time. And at the end of that project, at the end of that research, I needed to present my findings and the information to a load of doctors. And I cannot tell you how terrifying that was, to be stood in an auditorium, my PowerPoint behind me, 5'2" female nurse in front of probably close to 100 people in that auditorium. A lot of them, very, very successful consultants, doctors who were published in their fields, working locally but had a national presence. It was intimidating. And my God, the imposter syndrome was real. I did not feel like I should be there at all. Who was I as this one individual who, yes, I had my nursing degree, I had my nursing license and qualifications, but who was I to stand up in front of all of these people and say, these are the results of my findings and these are my recommendations. This is what I think we should do going forward to benefit the patients in our hospital. And as with every presentation, you're met with a lot of steely expressions. That's not because people are disinterested in what you're saying, but, most people have just got this resting face when they're listening to you talk anyway. And it was absolutely terrifying. I was quaking. We've got photos from after the presentation, and how I'm not bright red in the face, I've got absolutely no idea. It was just, I don't even know how to describe it. But I got up there, I gave my presentation. I was nervous as hell when the question and answer section came, because all I could think of was, please don't make me look stupid. But I fielded off the questions. And one of the biggest pieces of advice which I can give anybody for overcoming imposter syndrome is to remember that people turn up to listen to you. They want to hear what you've got to say. And that was one of the biggest things that actually got me through that presentation and the question and answer session afterwards, was remembering that those 100 or so people would not have turned up if they weren't interested in what I had to say. It didn't matter what their qualifications were, what their expertise was, what their background was. They turned up because they wanted to listen to what I had to say. What were the results of my research, and what were my findings, and what were my recommendations? If they weren't interested in that, they wouldn't have turned up. And exactly the same can be said for your online course. If people are not interested in what you have to say, they won't turn up, they won't listen to you. But the fact that people have come to your landing page, that they have found you through Instagram, through YouTube, through whatever medium it is that you put out there to advertise your course and your services, people have then come to your course and your landing page because they want to hear what you have got to say. They're interested in your point of view. They're interested in what you can give them. And to me, that is one of the most powerful things that you can remember when imposter syndrome rears its head. Yes, it's okay to feel nervous. Nerves are actually good. Use them and turn them into energy. But one of the biggest things that I can ask you to do when you're feeling like you are not the person to teach your course is remember that people are showing up for you. And I think that piece of advice is really, really powerful. And every time I have now gone into a presentation, gone into a teaching course, gone into a lesson, just anything where I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I don't know enough. I'm not the person to teach this. This is, I just feel like an imposter. I don't feel like I should be here. I don't have the qualifications. I don't have the training, the expertise, whatever it is it's remembering that, yes, you might be feeling that, but to other people, you have got exactly what they want. You have got that nugget of information, that how-to, that guide, that tutorial. You've got that information that they want, and people will not turn up to see you if they don't think they can get what it is that they want from you. And I think that that is so, so powerful and so, so important. And just going back to that example of what I was saying about giving that presentation to all those doctors, is the opportunities that came as a fallout of that were absolutely phenomenal. I ended up writing an article in the Nursing Times, which is a national journal in the UK. I also ended up working with the UK Sepsis Trust. They've got a training manual around sepsis, and I authored one of those chapters, which I was so, so proud of, and it was amazing to have that experience. And I also went to conference and I presented some posters at conference around the work I'd done. And those opportunities would not have come about if I hadn't had the gumption to give that presentation, because at the end of the presentation I had people coming up to me saying, you need to get this published, you need to, take this to conference, you need to, put it out there, what you have researched and what you've done, which, I probably wouldn't have had the confidence to do that if people hadn't suggested it to me. And it's exactly the same with your online course. Once you get over that imposter syndrome, once you put out your information, put out your course, you don't know what opportunities might come as a result of that. I'm not saying that someone's going to pick up the phone to you immediately and say, hey, can you come and present at this conference? Or hey, can you come and collaborate on this online course or whatever? But what you can then do is start upping your confidence and improving your confidence. You're thinking, right, I've done this one thing. I've done my online course. I've put it out there. Well, actually, maybe I want to advertise it on a podcast. So maybe what I do is I email or, reach out in some way or another to somebody who's got a podcast, whose audience are in my niche. And I say, hey, I've got this online course and I'd really like to come on your show and talk about it and talk about the subject around the course and promote it to your audience. They might say no, but they might say yes. And slowly what you're doing is chipping away at that imposter syndrome and that feeling of being an imposter, because you go on one podcast and talk about your course and people start seeing you as more of an authority. And then maybe you write a blog post about it and stick it on your website. And again, you're improving your authority on the subject. And before you know it, you've got a collection of pieces of evidence behind you, which makes you think, actually, yeah, I do know what I'm talking about. People are coming to me. They're looking at my Instagram posts. They're looking at my Facebook posts or Twitter posts, whatever social media medium that you're using. And people are seeing me as an authority on my subject. And slowly that will help you with those feelings of imposter syndrome. And don't get me wrong, imposter syndrome never goes away. If I had to go and give the same presentation tomorrow to that same room full of doctors, I would still be absolutely terrified, but I would feel more confident, and hopefully that confidence would override that terror and that sense of I shouldn't be here and this isn't for me. And that confidence will help push me through. And as I said, the same works with online courses. When I did my first online course, I remember feeling so nervous. I was thinking, who am I? I know nothing about online courses. I know nothing about online education. I can teach in a classroom. I'm qualified to teach in a classroom, but how does that translate online? And when I put out my first online course, it was for a business that a company I was working for at the time. And all I could think was, no one's going to buy this. Nobody's going to view it. Everyone's going to think it's rubbish because I don't know anything about training online. But actually, as I created more courses, that sense of imposter syndrome, it was still there. Don't get me wrong. Every time I put out an online course, I think, oh my gosh, what on earth am I doing? But at the same time, my confidence has grown with online courses. I understand how to apply the teaching theory that I know from my training and my qualifications. I know how to apply that to online courses now. I know how to structure an online course so that people learn from it. and it's attached to education theory to make it the best course that it possibly can be. So imposter syndrome, it's annoying, don't get me wrong, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. What imposter syndrome can do for us as well is help us to become more prepared. If we're feeling underconfident, then maybe that's actually telling us something. Maybe that's saying to us that we need to be going and researching our topic a little bit more before we put the information out there. Maybe it's telling us that actually we need to learn a bit more about landing pages before we create the landing page of our online course. Maybe it's telling us we need to go and find out more about how to write for the internet and write for learning before we go and write an ebook, which will be accompanying our online course. So sometimes imposter syndrome can be good because it actually tells us internally where we need to be looking at changing our viewpoint or gaining additional skills before we go forward with what it is that we need to be doing. So that's something to bear in mind. But as I said, imposter syndrome, it's not necessarily a bad thing. And it's remembering that with imposter syndrome, you are not the only person who is working with it. And as I said, there are so many people, experts in their fields, who are working with imposter syndrome every single day, myself included. There are some courses which I've taught face-to-face. It feels like a million times. And every time I go into the classroom, I think, what am I doing? I don't know enough about this subject. What if somebody asks about this? What if somebody throws this question my way? What if somebody says that they don't agree with my point? But every time you go in, you get more confident and you deal with the situations as they arise. And most of the time, the things that you're worrying about, what if somebody asks that question? They don't. Or if they do, you just hold your hands up and honestly say, do you know what, I've got no idea, I'm really sorry. You're going to have to go away and research that. Or I'll look it up and I will come back to you with an answer. What's the worst thing about that? Nobody's ever asked me for a course refund because I've said I don't know the answer to something, because they've turned up for the information that I could give them at that point in time. And so we've talked an awful lot about imposter syndrome, and one of the key takeaways, or the key takeaway that I want you to have from this episode, is remembering that people have showed up to your online course because they want what you can give them. They want the information that you can give them. They want your take on the information that you can give them as well. And I think that is so, so powerful. So take the nerves that imposter syndrome brings, but don't let them overrule you. Have that confidence to remember that you do have a voice and you do have an opinion on what it is that you want to teach. And take that energy, make sure that you thoroughly plan your online course so that you are fully prepared to teach that online course. And as a little caveat, I'm really, really excited because this week I have just launched my my first workbook, which is all about planning your online course. And there's 50 odd pages in there of how-to guides and lesson plans and checklists and worksheets that you can use again and again and again. Once you've downloaded this workbook, you can keep using it again and again and again for multiple online courses. And if you check out the link in the show notes, if you access that workbook within the next couple of weeks, there is going to be an exclusive discount. If you follow the link in or read the show notes below, there'll be more information about that exclusive discount for that workbook. Usually retails at $47, but as I said, there will be an exclusive discount in the show notes below if you check that out and click that link in the next couple of weeks there. As I said, planning your course thoroughly will help with imposter syndrome. It won't take away imposter syndrome completely, but it will help. And as I said, people are turning up to listen to you. I really, really hope that you've found this episode useful talking about imposter syndrome. If you have enjoyed this episode, please tell people about it. What I would love you to do is please leave me a review in whichever medium that you're listening to this on, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whichever one it is, please leave me a review, because first of all, I love reading reviews, but also it gives me an idea as to how this podcast is doing, and it lets me know how you're receiving it, how I can improve it for the future, and any other ideas of things that I can include in future episodes. So please leave me a review. I would really, really appreciate it. And in the meantime, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I will see you next time, and happy content creating.